Hey y'all, welcome back. What is that? That would have bugged me. We are here. I know I missed last week, and this is what happened. So we had gone out of town and we were supposed to be coming back into town, and everything was going to work out great on Saturday. Okay? Everything was going to work out just fine. And what happened was our flight that was normally supposed to leave Virginia at 2 p.m. was delayed 5 hours. And we barely made our connecting flight in Charlotte. And the lady was telling me that if we didn't get on that connecting flight, that there was no flights that we could get on at least through the next day. So we would have been stuck in Charlotte with 3 kids, 6, 4, and 4 months. So when we got off the plane, we ran across Charlotte Airport. And if anyone's been to Charlotte Airport, it's huge. Okay. The walking time from A gate to D gate, which of course our connecting flight was in D gate, was like 11 minutes, and we got there in like 5 minutes. It was very interesting, but we made it. We got on the flight. Everything is fine. So we're here, but we did not get home until like 1:30 in the morning. That's when we finally were like in bed. So it was just one of those things. I was like, I'm skipping that today. I just don't have the energy. I can't do it. So, but we're here now. So first off, for anyone who's new here, welcome. Hi, welcome. I am a children's book author and illustrator, and I started doing these deep dives because I was wanting to know more. Okay. And for anyone who's watched a handful of my videos, you will know that there are skeletons in this closet that I did not anticipate. So it's been very, very interesting. It's been very interesting to know kind of the life story behind some of these people. So if you end up liking this video, go back to the playlist, watch the playlist. Some of those stories are pretty crazy. Also, please make sure to subscribe. I am trying to get to 1,500 subscribers. That's like my next goal. So thank you so much for subscribing, and make sure to like the video if you enjoy it. So today we are talking, Today we're talking about Quentin Blake. Why is this not coming out? He was born on December 16th, 1932 in London. So what's kind of fun was I stumbled across a bunch of videos from Quentin Blake himself, where he kind of is talking about like his whole life. Okay. He specifically started to talk about his childhood and how he ended up going to this grammar school, like the Chislehurst and Side Up Grammar School for Boys. And he kind of had talked about, he was kind of always interested in art to a certain degree, but it really wasn't until he started this grammar school. That's when he really started to put attention on it and kind of dedicate time and energy into it and trying to develop his style. He also goes on to say that he just was not a sports kid. He did not like sports and he was just a creative spirit. So, he just said he wasn't into like cricket and, a whole bunch of things. He was just more of a creative soul. And also while he was I don't feel like doing this on my eyes. I'm taking my kids to the splash pad today, and I just don't feel like putting on anything too crazy. So while he was at this school, there was a school paper that was done, and he actually ended up writing and illustrating some pictures for this newspaper. Now, with him kind of reflecting back on it in his older age, he was just kind of talking about how he was not too fond of the work that he done. But I think it's important to remember that we all start somewhere. Of course, we can always be critical of ourselves way down the line with more experience and maturity. Of course, we're going to look back and say, well, that work wasn't very good. But in your mind of like a small kid, that's really good, so just take all your work with a grain of salt. Don't be too hard on yourself. Then as he got older, he went and studied English at Downing College in Cambridge. And then he went on to get a postgraduate teaching degree at the University of London. Then he later went on to the Chelsea Art School. And this was a way for him to just kind of really still keep working on his craft. So for those of you guys who have watched like the A.A. Milne video and some other videos, you will know that Punch Magazine is a common thread between a lot of these people. Okay. Several times have I mentioned this in other videos. This Punch Magazine is like a big deal. So when he was 16, he ended up getting his first illustrations published in Punch Magazine, but it wasn't all that easy. It wasn't like he just submitted in his first one and then that was it. And they put it in there and, it was great. So it was because the fact that he submitted a lot of work to Punch Magazine themselves, and he kept getting rejected. But I think it was also because the husband of his Latin teacher, if that makes sense, he kind of had connections to the magazine too. So I'm not really sure how much he had to kind of pull to have that happen. I'm not sure if he had any pull in that situation, but I saw that point brought up several times. So, I don't think it takes away from his talent, because I think if he wasn't talented to have it published, then Punch Magazine would never even have done it. Even if there was someone that they knew and that person had some pull, I don't even think they would have even published it. So I don't think it takes away from that for himself. So he was only 16 when that happened. So that's pretty cool. He then even went on to contribute to some other magazines too, down the line. One was called The Spectator. Now we're going to zoom up a little bit because I want to spend a lot of time on the relationship between Roald, which I'll get to that in a second, and Blake. So we're going to just kind of jump up just a little bit to the beginning of his career in children's books. Now, when I first looked into this, people were saying that his first book was this book in 1961. It was this book by Evan Hunter called The Wonderful Button. And some people said that this was his first book, but upon me looking a little bit more, it was actually a book 1 year prior in 1960, and that was John Yeoman's, probably saying that wrong, A Drink of Water. These books were the one that kind of just started his whole career in the children's book space. When Quentin got a little bit older, he did teach for like 20 years at the Royal College of Art. That was from 1978 to 1986. That's when he was doing that. But in 1978, this is when he ends up meeting Roald Dahl. Now, I'm kind of conflicted when it comes to the pronunciation of Roald, because in my video of Roald Dahl, I pronounced it Roald, and I looked it up before I did that video. Okay, you guys have even seen me in these videos looking up how to pronounce these things. But Roald himself said that the name was pronounced Roald. So just know, going forward, I'm going to honor the way he pronounces his own name, and I'm going to say Roald. That's a big asterisk for that video, so just heads up. But we're here now. So like I said, the pair met in 1978. Now, at this time, both of these men had been working on their own careers. They were totally separate from each other. They were both, very established in their careers, but they had never had a consistent creative partner to work with. Now, while I do think it's normal to kind of jump around with illustrators, I think a lot of the time it's probably more standard to kind of have a person you're working with, because I think, kind of once you find something that just kind of works between two people, you kind of tend to stay there. If you find this harmonious balance, you don't want to mess it up. So I think a lot of the times, when authors do find illustrators that they really enjoy, they tend to stay with that person. And also just over time, your collaboration becomes better, your working relationship becomes better, and it just creates a better experience for everyone involved. And I think that becomes very typical. So this whole time, both men had been working with just different people. And when they first met each other, it wasn't like love at first sight. They honestly didn't see eye to eye on a lot. They kind of had to go back and forth a lot when it came to different things. And I think, they might have both been kind of stuck in their ways a little bit. They both were very established in their careers. They felt very confident in what they were talking about. And the first book that Quentin was supposed to work with Roald on was The Enormous Crocodile. And ultimately, Quentin did make a bunch of sketches for Roald to look at, but they had to go back and forth quite a bit on it before they kind of finally nailed down what they wanted. Let me just say this. As an illustrator myself, who have illustrated my own books, plus illustrating for other people, I would say this is very, very normal. This is very normal. I don't want people to feel like this is not normal, because sometimes the author will have something in their mind and the illustrator does their best to bring that to life. But sometimes this takes a little bit of finessing on both ends and that collaboration effort. So it's definitely very normal, but I think this is more so kind of the experience surrounding it. I think that seemed to be kind of the sticking point. That's just kind of what I read as I was reading through this. That's just the vibe I got. There was just more so contention, if that's the right word, around this time period for the two. Now, something eventually clicked for the two because they did go on to create 18 books together, but there's more to the story. I did read a lot of articles when it came to the working relationship that these men had, And from what I gathered, both men were kind of particular, and Roald himself was sometimes very specific on like what he wanted in his characters, and I totally get that. For example, when it came to Roald's book, The Twits, this one took a lot of finessing, even when it came to Mr. Twits's beard. Now, they went through a lot of different versions for this character. So after they had gone through several versions of this character, this is when Roald was like, okay, I need to get really specific here. So he told Quentin that he wanted it to look like it grew spikes that stuck out straight like the bristles of a nail brush. As an illustrator myself, this kind of like direct guidance would be just exactly what I would want. I want to know exactly what you want. I want to know what details you want me to put in. Don't be wishy-washy about it. Just straight up ask me what you want. Straight up tell me, we need to change this, we need to do this, blah, 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 blah. Okay, that's the best thing for me. So the point for both of the men were their relationship. And when I say relationship, I mean like friendship, working relationship, you know what I mean? The part for them that was kind of a real big turning point was when Quentin was actually able to visit Roald at his home. So he went to his home. So Quentin goes to Roald's home in Buckinghamshire. That is a very interesting name. So it was Buckinghamshire village of Great Missenden. I'm probably totally botching that. Sorry, guys. When Quentin was here, he was able to witness Roald kind of in his element, you know? He was able to watch him interact with his family, especially his granddaughter. And this seems to have really just kind of changed Quentin's view on Roald. And here is when he said that he got kind of a light bulb moment when it came to the BFG characters, because that was kind of the book they were working on at that time period. And that's when he got that light bulb moment. Now, when Quentin was first drawing these characters, he actually drew the BFG more kind of as a comedic kind of clown character. But it was after this interaction with Roald, that's when he made a lot of connections between that main character and Roald. He went on to say that they were both, quote, tall men who put dreams into children's heads. This is where he completely redesigned the character to have more of a human element to it, and ended up becoming the character that we know and love today. And like I said, this seemed to kind of have been the turning point for the pair, and they went on to have a very good relationship, both just as a friendship and a working relationship. They did go on to create those 18 books together. When I was reading about their working relationship, something I really enjoyed was they always had this really good collaboration effort between each other. And it seems like they never really lost that. But Roald never lost his specificity either. He apparently, for the same BFG book, he was very particular in the footwear that the BFG was in. So he ended up sending Quentin sandals. Like the sandals that he wanted the BFG to be in. He sent them to Quentin to have. And so it was like little stories like that. I really enjoy knowing more about these books, because when you go to read these books again, knowing more of the backstory, it just gives you another level of appreciation for these books, knowing either how much work went into them or, you know, all the other things that the author was going through at the time and whatnot. Because as you guys have known through all these different stories, there's quite a lot. And Roald also went on to speak very, very highly of Quentin himself, at one point calling him the finest illustrator in the children's book world. I'm just going to finish up my mascara because I feel like it's so distracting when I have this thing on my eyeballs. So let me just finish this up. Okay, there we go. Jeez. So the last book that the pair worked on together was called SEO Trot. I believe that's how you pronounce it. This was in 1990. And unfortunately, 2 months after they were done working on the book, this is when Roald passed away. I can only imagine what that was like for Quentin, having worked with Roald for so long and having such a strong relationship, like a strong friendship. That would just be very, very hard. And after this book, Quentin didn't go on to continue to work on other projects. Quentin has also won several awards for his illustrations, including the highest international accolade for illustrations, which is the Hans Christian Andersen Award for Illustration. And that was in 2002. For those of you who watch my other videos, you know that I tend to include details about their personal life when it comes to, you know, who they marry, how many kids they have, things like that. But looking into this portion of Quentin's life, he was never married, but he also likes to keep his private life very personal. And he just kind of has just said, just kind of matter of factly, like he was never married, he doesn't have any kids. So, I mean, that's kind of all I have to say on that. But honestly, if he's really wanting to keep his personal life like very, very private and closed doors, then fine by me. I'll just honor that. So Quentin has gone on to create over 300 children's books, which is crazy. I would dream of that number. I would absolutely love to do that in my lifetime. So far, I'm on 2. Currently working on, well, illustrated for somebody else, so that would be 3. And then I'm now working on 3, so that's going to put me at 6. So still have quite the ways to go, putting a dent in on the number 300, but that's very aspirational. He even worked with Dr. Suess. And what I thought was very interesting was the book that he did for Dr. Suess was the first book for Dr. Suess that Dr. Suess did not illustrate himself. So, wow, what a compliment to you as an illustrator. That's absolutely insane. Very commendable. That's unbelievable. And Quentin Blake is actually still alive. So he is the first person I've done where he's still alive. Quentin is currently 92 and he's living in West London. So that is the story on Quentin Blake. Quentin, if you ever come across the story, I hope I did you good. So let me know all your thoughts down below. Throw me a like if you like this video. It appeases the algorithm gods. Make sure to subscribe and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.